I've tried multiple things. You can either, wait, be patient, and you can start farther back. There's a lot of different things you can try. Usually in serve receive, I'm already taking my step before the setter's contacting the ball. My first, like say my fourth step, if I do a 4-step approach, my first step off of trans, my cue would be more after I see the set before I make that first step. So as far as timing, that would be a little bit of a change to give myself more time. And that step is almost like a skate where I'm like shifting across the top of the sand, or if you think of like an animal prowling. I'm not like just sprinting in. It's like this really like slow push off, I'm prowling in, not like a commitment step.
Is Mark Burik, and today we have a really cool treat. Billy Allen is going to be with us. Billy Allen is a longtime AVP and FIVB pro. He has contributed socially and in terms of the knowledge base and in terms of the entertainment value of the game. Contributed from things back in the day like Danny Kinda, which was a character where if you don't know or haven't seen Kinda videos, I recommend checking it out if you need a good volleyball laugh at dannykinda.com. Billy is also an author, he's a husband, he's a father, and is in his blood. I know that both of his parents have owned a volleyball club together, and he's been playing for a long time and doing it successfully. And to pick his brain and see what knowledge we can get from him, he also is one of the co-hosts of another podcast, which if you're listening to a volleyball podcast, it's called Coach Your Brains Out. It's also the Gold Squared podcast that I listened to religiously for a few years when I was getting started. Super high quality information. Make sure that you go and you check that out. It's in the show notes. It's in the description. So make sure you subscribe to their podcast as well. But welcome and thanks for coming, Billy Allen.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you bringing up I think most people don't remember that. So
it's sad when I know that people don't remember it. You get to the new, new generation or people who are neos, because it spread like wildfire as soon as you guys started videos. YouTube influencer kind of stars before it was a thing, before it was popular. And they were so good and so perfect inside jokes for volleyball players. You guys crushed it, and I do miss seeing those.
Yeah, we were too early. We could have made money if we had done it a little later with better cameras.
Some audio, but no. I went through your Instagram profile and I just clicked on a couple videos, and my wife started laughing at me laughing so hard. So the highlight of your career, I want to go into something kind of interesting that I just saw, and I don't know if you treat it as you're proud of it, not satisfied with it. But I looked at your BVB info profile, and the friends that you played were 2004, and your first championship, first place was in 2016. So going at it successfully, consistently good finishes. And then 12 years into it, you get your first title. And I think it was the next year, maybe 2 years later, you got another AVP title. Could you talk me emotionally through how that felt? As somebody who's been playing almost as long, I've got 1/3. It stinks. I want an AVP title too, but to play for those many years, is that an absolute pump up moment, or was it kind of a sigh of relief of patting yourself and yeah, I am one of the world's best volleyball players? How do you think about it when you look back on it?
I think it's twofold. One, I wish I would have won earlier for sure, but no, I'm definitely proud of sticking with it. I think if you look at my career, there was never a big breakthrough moment. It was just kind of like you said, a steady climb. And I'm definitely proud of the perseverance, because there were a lot of players better than me who were all Americans in college who jumped in the beach game and, suffered losses like we all did. And they gave it up, and I stuck with it. And yeah, just slowly got better every year. I think if you look at BVB, it's just this slow climb. And then as far as I get closer, I got, a couple thirds, make a final. And then I think that moment of winning I don't think I got to enjoy it too much, because we were actually heading to the airport to go to Hamburg, Germany for an FIVB. And we were so stressed that we weren't going to make it that we went to the airport airport before the final and checked our bags in, and then drove back, didn't even warm up, showed up. We won a match in 3. We had a really good comeback in the 3rd. I think we were down 8-2 or something against the Crowd Brothers. And as soon as we won, we ran back to the airport. So yeah, I don't think I was ever had a chance to I think a week later when I got home, I kind of let it sit in, but by that point it was kind of back to work, training for the next tournament. So
it's huge. You know that the USA has some of the best beach volleyball players, and to win, and you could, at least for that moment, even though you're not playing with the full FIVB tournament, but you get that satisfaction of you know what, this weekend maybe I was the best volleyball player essentially in the world, especially if we're competing in the AVP. There are teams that are doing that on a consistent level. It's a feeling that I'm envious of, that since I know that after my highest finish, I forfeited because I didn't have what you had. I couldn't get to the airport. I had my partner for FIVB waiting in China. We won this match. We didn't win the match. Stafford forfeited because we hit him in the eye and goggles came about. He detached retina. And then I was like, okay, sucks to win that way, but now I'm sitting on my 3rd highest finish, and then I couldn't play in the semifinal, or I wouldn't play. It was a choice that I made because I knew Ian had already flown to China. I had an agreement with Russ March, and I was like, listen, if we make it this far, which neither of us have, I have to go. And that was a kind of celebratory, but kind of really sucky moment and time. And then when I got a 5th, which was another high finish, I had to sprint literally on my bike to go coach a beach class, for my beginner's class, because this is how that match went. So it's funny when you get that point where you reach some of your highest satisfaction moments and you don't actually have energy to celebrate. But would you tell other players and maybe coaches or leaders that they should take that time to celebrate? Or is it when you have a new high, say, get back to work immediately?
I think with both losses and wins, you should definitely give yourself space to sit in it for a little bit. Even if you have a bad loss, it's hard just to tell a player oh, just get over it, move on. I think you need some room to grieve and let whatever emotions are coming that are natural happen, take their course. And the same with the win. I think we play so many volleyball tournaments, and most of those you don't win. You're not Phil Dalhouser or whoever. Most of end with a loss. So yeah, I think you should definitely cherish and celebrate the moments you do well, as long as it doesn't linger too long and stop you from training because you think you got it now. I know I enjoyed my 2nd one more because I had a little bit of time to think about it, but also it was Stafford who I played with, his 1st win, and I was just kind of relieved that I didn't blow it for him. And I was just happy to celebrate with him and enjoy that for sure. But then once you get there, then you just want to win more. It's kind of you tasted it and you think, oh, we can do this, and so how do we do it again?
Reaching the finals, that you could consider that a turning, or is there a turning point that you felt, or a season that you had, or a partner that you had that propelled you to that next Sunday level?
No, I think making a semi felt similar to making a final. I mean, a little different because it's I don't know, you're still on stadium for a semi usually. You're still a huge crowd, still a big moment. So I think at the time when I made my first a 3rd, it felt similar to, I think I made a final in Manhattan with Brad Keenan. It was Corona Wide Open, or Cuervo, I forget what it was called. So maybe I felt a little bit more. For me, it's more the teams you beat along the way. So I think I felt bigger breakthroughs if I beat a top team. If you beat a Phil and Rosie, or you beat a Jake and Casey or whoever, then it's I beat the top guys in our sport, so I can compete against anybody. And whether that happens with a 5th or a 7th, I think that was one that gave me more breakthrough of I have the ability to beat anybody if I'm on. And I think those were the bigger moments where I thought I could do this than just having a good finish.
Okay. Your measuring sticks are, do you remember early on, year by year, which teams were on your target list for, this is the guy or this is the team that I want to be this year, that took you off? For me, a long time ago, you and John Mayer, Hayden just wiped the floor with me for a very long time. So can I even touch him? And when you practice with him and he sides out 10 balls and you literally haven't touched one of them, you're like, man, maybe I just don't belong. You get that win. You're like, okay, here you go. You'll push this. But do you remember your list of hits?
Yeah, I don't remember. I think at the time it was so many guys. The list was so long that it was just if I beat anybody, I'll be happy. But I know for sure I didn't beat Nick Lucena until last year, and I beat him twice. He was the one guy that I'd beaten Phil a couple of times with different partners, but I hadn't beat Nick. And a couple years before that it was Hayden and whatever. But I think he was the last guy that I hadn't beaten. So that was really recent. So that was the one time maybe I think Hayden too, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I kept that in my head. Yeah, so maybe it's a defender thing where you're hey, these are guys that I'm competing against directly, and it's a little little easier to compare how I match up against him than like a Phil or a Lambo.
Do you think that that's a good way for who are coming up to sort of measure themselves, or should they do all of the and say like, no, play your game, measure yourself by just you? You know, it is easy to have a high finish if a few teams don't show up, so you could sort of pat yourself on the back and beat that one team that I really want to beat. So do you think younger players should be almost comparing themselves, I guess, which is like anti the advice that we're always given, like, no, play your own game, measure your own success?
I think you can do both. I think you can, I mean, at the end of the day, you are competing against yourself and how you can be your best self. And like, I'll never be the same as a Todd Rogers or something like that. But at the same time, I think you should, anything you can use to motivate you to play better. And we saw in that Jordan doc, like he would use imaginary things to motivate himself against players. So it's less of like, am I as good as this person? And like, I need to prove myself to be better. You know, it's not that. It's just like embracing the competition, because there's so many times where we look at a draw and we're like, I have to play this. This is a tough draw. I have to play this tough team. But I think if you looked at that as like, oh, I get to go head to head with like one of the top defenders right now, that's a way better way to frame it. And so, yeah, like hunt big game, you know, like go after that stuff rather than think you have a bad draw and stuff like that. So I think it's twofold. I think you can compare as far as detach and say like, oh, what does their game have that I don't? But as far as like basing your worth off of that comparison, then I think that's where you can maybe get into trouble. Because yeah, everybody's different and you just have to be better today than you were yesterday.
So sort of like goals, measuring sticks, but not necessarily a value of what you're, you know, who you're playing a ball game against.
Yeah, I think it's
that's
a really good way to put it, because I feel like, yeah, you're going to be yourself, but yeah, it is a measuring stick as far as, you know, your climb. But again, it is your climb. Like you're not trying to like, you know, totally emulate another player. So you have to be yourself. And, you know, there's guys you maybe can't beat, and that doesn't mean you're a failure, because you're still comparing yourself against yourself. But yeah, I think you should look forward to those challenges, and whatever you can do to motivate yourself to be fired up to play somebody helps.
Did you, along your career, when you were consistently getting like next levels, would you attribute that to adding on a certain skill or a certain piece of knowledge or strategy each year, or consistent at what you were doing and learning your game better?
Yeah, I think if I looked at my physicalness or most of my skill sets when I was, you know, a couple years on to now, it's probably not that drastic. I probably, you know, jumped higher then. So I think it's definitely more decision making, consistency, trust and belief in yourself. I think, you know, I was never a guy that came out thinking I was hot stuff and I deserved to be in finals all the time. I think I had to really earn that confidence. And so I think that was a little slower road for me. But then I think maybe skill wise, I know my first portion of my career, I never hand set. I was a bump setter, and I was pretty risk averse and just afraid of, you know, getting called for the ball. And so as far as the skills, that's probably,
and you were an indoor setter, right?
Yeah. So as far as skills, that was the one it wasn't a matter of like bad hand. It was just a matter of, you know, committing to do it and being a little more fearless. That was maybe one upgrade that I made at a certain point in my career that really helped boost me.
So hand setting may have been that one attribute. And then you said confidence, you know, confidence or trust in yourself and in your game. Is there a way to explain that in a deeper way? Can you give a specific example of what trusting yourself in a game or on a specific play means to you, or what that breakthrough was in a micro moment?
Yeah, I think I've thought a lot about confidence, because I feel like it's something that has plagued me, where it's like I have a little hard on myself, and so it's a little bit of self-doubt, like, oh, do I deserve to be here? You know, am I as good as these players? And I've seen players, at least from the outside, that have, you know, loads of confidence, that think they're awesome, and that carries them a certain degree. I think I've settled on basically the idea that there's two kinds of confidence. There's confidence in the moment, and that's stuff that's basically out of our hands. And that's like more of a feeling. Like if I just got blocked, all of a sudden my confidence level goes down a little bit. Or if I make a great play, my confidence level goes up. And that's a little bit more of just like a feeling that comes and goes. And then I think there's the confidence that you earn by your preparation and by your experience and what you've done. And I can go into a match saying, hey, like I've competed at this level before. I've put in a lot of work to get here. And that confidence is kind of a little more lasting and can be like, hey, I have the right to compete here and like compete with this team. And then the fast confidence that comes and goes with, you know, play by play, I just gotta know that it's out of my hands, and I guess just choose courage over confidence, as in like, oh, even if I feel no confidence in that moment because I've made a couple of errors, I can still like step into the arena and be courageous and compete, even if I don't feel like all that.
Do you think in terms of any individual, like, do you react differently now than you did 10 years ago after you get blocked twice in a row? Individually, I feel like after my second block here, I boost up. I used to probably shut down. Now I'm like, now I'm going to show you why you shouldn't block me, because statistically, it's supposed to swing back in my favor right about now.
Yeah, yeah. I would say my initial reaction is the same. It hurt then and it hurts now. But like you said, I'm sure I can detach it more and look at it analytically and be like more of a problem solver, where it's like, oh, what am I going to, the idea of like, feed forward, like, what am I going to do on this next play? How am I going to adjust? How can I solve this problem? More than like, oh, I suck, I got blocked, or whatever the thing is. So I think the initial reaction is the same because it's a feeling, it just happens. But I'm able to maybe detach a little more and think, what am I going to do? What adjustments am I going to make? And how do I solve this problem?
Are you, when you're going into things offensively, thinking that you should be planning series of shot or swings to open up, or are you going into each offensive attack with like your blank mind of, I don't know what's going to happen, I don't know offensively before, I don't really care? Are you just reacting in that moment and seeing what you see, strategically planning it out to because of what happened earlier and what you think they're trying to do?
When I'm playing at my best, it's more improv and you come in free and you trust what you see or your instincts. I'm not always there. And so when I'm not, I think it comes with vision too. Like there's times where your vision's not there, whether you're under the ball, you're in a funk, whatever it is, you're passing bad. And I think at those times, I do have a list in my head, a ledger of like what I've gone to, what the other team has stopped, what they expect. And there are times where I try to stay ahead of them. At the same time, there are moments where I know I need to give a certain shot in order to earn the freedom back. So for me, a lot of people play to my high line a lot, and I know that, and I'll have to throw in a couple sharper
But it's
stuff
because
just to keep them honest. Yeah, yeah. Yes.
you
so
force them to.
I know. Yeah, and so I know how teams will play me for the most part, and so I do need to keep them honest by throwing in some stretch shots or things that are not as comfortable. But again, I think when you're playing your best, you're coming in free and you're reacting to what you see. And if you have to hit a line shot 3 or 4 times in a row, that's awesome, because that's what's open.
Okay. Yeah,
But
I think I got for you. Go ahead.
If I script anything, it's come in and hit high and hard to the corner, because that's that's like after I get stopped, that's a tough play to stop. And if I can establish that, then I think that opens up the rest of my game.
I think I used to try to come in open-minded and I would get stuck. And this is what I'm training our players to do right now, is have your A swing for every point. Like when you start this point, think about how you're going to terminate it, and then just have an off switch. If they do this, which is designed to stop that swing, then what's your secondary? And then maybe your third is like you're in trouble. So I'm trying to get players to be more systematic and not create in the moment. And I think a lot of that is coming from studies of multiple decisions. Like they did the purchasing study and decision study when they put 27 jellies in a supermarket, and they saw how fast people would buy or choose a jelly. They thought that more options would mean that they're more likely to buy. But in fact, they're way less likely to buy. They froze in their decision. They couldn't make it. And when they put 2 jellies, people bought faster and more often. And they did the same thing with fighter pilots in the U.S. Air Force, where they made binary decision trees instead of a completely open field. And they found that the errors decreased. And so now when I'm thinking about my offense and when I'm trying to help players decrease errors, I try to not give them open mind. I say, let's try to establish your best swing, or whatever you think the swing you need is right now. And then just have if they do this, I'm doing this specifically to decrease errors. And I found, at least anecdotally and without taking hardcore stats on my players, that it's helping them decrease errors at the very least. Do you think there's any weight on that?
Yeah, for sure. I think anytime you can simplify something, that leads to more consistency and stuff. I think it has to do with probably level of competence. Like I remember playing like a John Mesco and seeing, oh, he's got a really good cut shot and he can hit a high line, and if that's all you need to do and that keeps you really squared away, that's awesome. But eventually somebody might creep in on something like that. So it's I mean, if I'm struggling and I can keep it simple, that's great. If I'm playing at my best, that's when I feel like a little more free to do anything. But if I'm definitely in a hole, then it's easier to worry about 2 problems than 5 or 6. And same thing on defense. Like if I'm playing my best defense, maybe I'm just free, but it's rare that you're in that moment of everything's working. And so sometimes you got to simplify it and be like, hey, I'm taking these 2 shots. So I think there's definitely something to that.
Yeah, I like that idea. I see a lot of B, A, AA players who get so mad after every point they lose, expecting that this is just in that moment that they missed this dig. And then you'll see guys AVP and FIVB level not care at all, when somebody gets 3 kills in a row, because they're thinking like long-term strategy, ready to pick up that last one or the third one. And also, taking away 1 or 2 swings and promising yourself that you will take away at least that one. And once you make that promise to yourself, you lose that frustration that builds when they hit the other one. You're like, we're not covering that. As long as we got that valid reasoning, like strategically, I think.
Yeah, we're giving them that shot. Like, we did our job.
Yeah, I think that's hard for a growing player to learn, that you're going to give up 17 points and it's going to be a very good win. Well, what do you think for defenders, other than just taking away a promise zone, for a defender, somebody who's or feeling undersized, what do you think that person's most important physical attribute is? And what would their most important mental attribute be?
Some mental ones that come to mind would be patience. I think especially at the lower levels, we see a lot of people breaking early and getting antsy. Like I'm angle defense, but I'm so worried about the high line that I leave early, or I'm imbalanced. And so I think, if you're playing against a good hitter with vision, you need to be a little more patient on defense and a little more settled. And then I would just say, just work ethic, just go for everything. I mean, the best defenders get sandy, and can you just train yourself to go after everything? That's going to make you better. So mentally, I'd say that is like ferociousness, where you're like scrambling. As far as physically, if you're fast and explosive, that helps.
Yeah, I'd say low to the ground, that good step, the drive off of that initial step is always nice, especially after like a good 2.5 month preseason, when you finally feel like the strength and speed in your legs. That's nice. It's nice to let your body just start taking over explosively. Well, what do you think was the hardest thing for you to learn as a player on defense?
I mean, still reading the game. I feel like I was pretty good at positioning myself in the line of fire for hard driven hits, but more of the off speed stuff. I mean, just really reading some stuff I maybe focus on the read would be, where's the set in relation to the net? Where's the set in relation to the hitter? Because a lot of times that dictates what they can do. What's the speed of their approach? Are they going to come in a bang, or are they slowing down? Are they taking a look? And then really seeing the hand to ball motion to get a little bit of a glimpse on where the ball's going. It's a lot to look at. It's a lot to factor in, especially when the ball is so shiny and we want to really just focus on the ball. But there's a lot of tells that you can get, especially at the lower levels where players aren't as good of hiding it, of where the ball will go. And so again, I think early in my career, I was pretty good from indoor of like lining up with where their approach is going and their hard driven swing and digging that. But more of the cuffs and off speed stuff, being able to, read that early enough to make a strong move to it is something that's very difficult. And there's a lot of people that are really fast. Like I remember hearing Nick Lucena would go out to train with Todd Rogers back when he was starting, and they'd go to the track and do Todd's workout, and Nick would just crush him. Like, he was just way faster. But on the volleyball court in the sand for like the 2-step burst towards the ball, Todd was just as fast. And I think it had a lot to do with, just the 2-step burst or 3 steps, but mostly with just reading and him seeing so many swings that he knew exactly what this look led to. So again, being fast is great, but I think you're not doing a full sprint in volleyball. It's usually just 1 or 2 steps to cover the court. And so if you can make the right move, that's probably even more important than a fast move.
You said that the distance from the net, if you could break that down for somebody who is like on your court, if you're coaching them.
Sure.
If the set is tighter or further off, what does that change for you as a defender?
Yeah, a couple of things. So let's say a scenario where my blocker's blocking line and I'm blocking angle. If the set gets
You're
tight,
defending angle, right?
Sorry, yeah, I'm defending it. We're not double blocking.
That would be sweet, though.
That opens up a sharper hit for them. They can cut it sharper from a tight spot than they can from off the net. From off the net, they have to give it some height and some loop to kind of cross the net. And I would have more time to get to, like, let's say a cut shot. So I might scoot in and play a little shallower, sharper if it gets tight. Another situation where my blocker is more read block, or I see them lined up where they're like on the ball. Then when it gets tight, I think more my job becomes a poke over the block, because hopefully they're going to swallow anything that's tight and that's hit hard. and I would maybe play a little bit more behind the block for a shot. So I guess those are two things that factor in. If somebody's hitting hard and they're off the net, it's going to have to go a little deeper. They can't really bounce 10-foot line from an offset on the beach, unless they're Mark Burik, you know. So then I might
with wind behind me.
Yeah, then I might stay a little deeper. If it gets tight and there's a big gap between my blocker and like the area they're hitting, then I'll kind of get my helmet on and get in there.
Okay, so you're stepping back instead of just like leaving your hands up if that sets off.
Sometimes, I mean, if you're a good overhand digger, I'd say, you know, you can get in there. Most people shoot when they're off, especially at the lower levels, because again, they don't have as much heat, you know, from off the net, and they can't hit downward on the ball. Yeah, I'd say, like, if I looked at my stats, and most players, they probably dig with their platform 80-90% of the time. And so that's usually my first goal, is to put myself in a position to dig there, and then the overhand's more of a reaction situation.
I've studied your defense for a while. You know, I look at you as one of the top defenders, and I want to see, like, what's he doing? Why is he getting better finishes and seeing that? And I've looked at this a lot, because there's a lot of high level defenders, and you're one of them, is on contact or before contact, even though we're all kind of trained and told, leave your hands free and in front of you. You know, I see Sean Rosenthal and a few other very high level defenders who are holding their hands together between their legs before that hard driven dig contact. So do you teach that a different way than do you know that? Have you had it, and what do you think your theories on it are?
Yeah, back to, like most balls I dig are with my platform, and so that's just how I get to faster. I worked on doing the scoop defense where you have your hands apart. For me, I maybe get some touches there, but not really controlled touches as much. And so, like, if I can expect the ball is hit towards my platform, I want my platform form nice and together. I think you got to look at your goal as a defender, right? Your goal is not just to dig balls, and your goal is not just to touch balls. Your goal is to, like, put balls away. And so if you're just touching a lot of things, that's great, but you need to be able to control the ball and get it up so that you can transition and put the ball away, because you don't score a point with a dig, you score a point with a trans ball. And so as often as I can get in a balanced position and get the ball up to my setter, that's kind of the most important thing. And usually that's with my platform together. The times where I have a one-arm stab, like, look awesome, but, you know, I think it's not a high percentage play.
I get the whole serve receive with your hands wide, and when people teach, like, okay, one hand is almost at shoulder level and then you drag the other one to that. There are so many coaches that are still teaching that. And I know that, like, the Olympic coaches, gold medal squared coaches, have gotten away from that completely. And the idea of building your platform kind of together in front of your body is now being taught by a lot of high level coaches, whereas that used to be like a complete sin. And when I see even the world's best liberos on indoor, I mean, before the ball even crosses the net, their hands are together in front of them. So there's this big disconnect I see, and I don't know if you agree, but I see between what so many coaches are still teaching with leave your hands out to the side and bring the other one to it so that you don't shank it off to the side. All of the world's best players are not doing that. They're leaving their hands, they're building them together, and then they're creating that angle with that. So what do you see, and what do you think specifically on that? I always want to ask you about that, and John too.
I think you have to train in reality. And a lot of times we don't know what we're doing. And, you know, we may think let's say our hands are apart and meeting at the ball. But if you're watching a lot of film as a coach, and it's predominantly people are locking their hands inside of their waist at some point, you know, it might not be straight on their midline, might be a little bit to their side, but then you're swinging those arms like an elephant trunk. If you know that's happening, you're really trying to fight your players from doing that. I think you're just slowing them down by trying to fight that. So if you know it's happening, how can for me, the goal becomes, how do I get them locked in faster so that move is faster? And so if you start with your hands wide and then have to bring them together in your midline and then swing out, to me, that's a slower move than just already starting in your midline and then making that move you're eventually going to make anyways. And I think this happens a lot with, you know, sports, where it's like there's this theory or something we think we do, and then maybe video or slow-mo kind of sheds a light on what actually happens, and it kind of changes some of that stuff. I know with baseball, there was some study about people were teaching swinging straight on the ball, or forever coaches were teaching whatever it was, like swinging straight or down on the ball. And they looked at, eventually had the technology to check the angle of a swing. And actually most people did swing up on the ball. And so for years, people were teaching basically the wrong thing.
The charm.
I think
Yeah.
a lot of times what players naturally do is probably the right answer. And there's going to be different biomechanics for different people's body types and stuff. And so I've become a little less strict and regimented on this is the one thing you should do to solve this problem, and kind of embracing some of the individuality of players within reason. But there's a lot of different ways to pass a volleyball. And if I can pass the target off my left hip or off my middle or off my side, like that just gives me more solutions to different problems that arise in a volleyball game. So yeah, I think there's one, like the training in reality and observing what you really do. Because even you asking me stuff on defense, maybe I don't know because it's what I feel. But then if you actually look at video, you can say, hey, what's the reality of it, right? I think that's a lot more concrete than just the stuff that we feel we're doing.
Yeah, and then there's that confirmation bias. When you are watching video, a lot of people I think are trying to prove whatever theory they have correct. So they're looking for little inches that say like, see, that's what he's doing. He's doing it the way that I think is right.
Oh, you can cherry pick which clips you use for your argument, but also like two guys looking at the same play might see something different, right? I remember hearing this about holding your platform after you pass, and the people that were for it, see, look how long he holds it. Other people are like, look, he breaks it apart, like the same play. So yeah, there is it's kind of in the eye of the beholder at some point.
You were proud of how long you've stuck with it, and that you keep coming back. For players that are experiencing doubt in their career, did you or do you manage that? What do you do to keep going? And is there a point where you would tell anyone, just stop? Find something else?
I wouldn't tell them to stop if that's what they wanted to do. If it was destructive to them or their families or financially, like maybe there's a point where it's not the right thing. But if it's just a matter of taking losses, I think you can suffer a lot and still compete and do stuff. People that we know that are in the qualifier that have a very low chance of winning matches in the main draw that stay at it. Like, yeah, there's no reason that you should give up. Just if you enjoy it and you like to compete, there's no way you should give up just because you're not going to like be at the top of the podium at the end of the day. As far as advice, I would look at it, and I did look at it more of like a macro picture of a career, and like, am I improving? Am I trending up in my ability? And that's going to change day to day, like a stock market. Maybe it's volatile here and there because you have good moments and bad moments, but as a whole, am I putting in the work, and is this trend going in the right direction? And that's what I use to kind of motivate me to stick with it. And then just also passion and gratitude and just enjoying what you do. Like, we can suffer a lot if we enjoy it. Like, as much as the losses sting. I remember I had probably one of my worst losses, and the lowest I felt was Ryan Doherty and I lost in a final in Hermosa in 3. We had a little lead going into the freeze. I think it was like 14-13 or 14-12. And I was
the freeze
taking a lot of the serves. Yeah, I was taking a lot of the serves, and I got stopped a couple times and hit a ball out, and we lost that match. And we were this close to winning a title. And then afterwards, I remember just walking down the strand and like just being embarrassed and hurt, and like, I'm like, why am I doing this? Is it worth it? Like, just feeling so low. But with some detachment, if I look at it macroly, like, no, that was our best tournament of the year. We got a second. We were like inches from winning. I think the self-doubt and the emotions will always be there. That's just natural. But I guess it's more about like your identity and who do you want to be, what do you want to be about, and how can I live those values out, because the doubt will always be there, and you guys still go to work.
Do you think that there are any players that don't doubt themselves?
Yeah, Austin Rester and Casey Patterson.
Austin Rester.
No. I mean, I think there were people that I looked at of like, not to throw those guys out. Those guys I'm joking by that. But some players, where you think it's easy to blame your partner, or to think that, that to not have doubt that you should be there, and just the world everything's rigged or something if it's not working your way. But I feel like the trap there is that maybe you don't put in the work because you think you're already good enough, and that because you're not winning, like it's somebody else's fault or something's, is not there. So confidence is great in the moment, but sometimes some self-doubt puts you to work.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you have any things that you lean on that you do specifically when you're recovering from that loss, or you're just not feeling like you are trending up? Do you have an activity, somebody you lean on? Do you go to your family and just hang out? Do you go hiking? Is there anything that you would give to somebody else that you say their mind or their activities should turn towards X when you feel like things are going crappy?
Yeah, I think if it's really bad, I think a little bit of space is great. And if you have some family or people to rely on, that's great. Usually I don't want to, see my friends or something at that moment because I'm still kind of depressed. But yeah, I think just having a level of gratitude for what you do and what you get to do. Like, hey, I'm healthy and I got to compete and use my body and be on a big stage, and with that comes a lot of risk, and some of these losses are going to hurt, but it's a pretty good honor to be able to do that. So I think some detachment and just be kind of grateful for the job you get to do, because a lot of people don't get that. I remember after that loss, I had somebody reach out to me and say like, oh, it's really hard like being on that big of a stage, let's say in a final and on TV, but like at the same point, most people in their normal jobs don't get that opportunity. And so it is a cool honor, even though there's a lot of highs and lows with that. For me, like, I guess the answer is, after a certain amount of grieving period, is always just to watch video and go back to analyze it and what can I do better next time.
Hmm. I like that. There's not a whole lot of professions, and I'm not saying that it hurts less, but there's not a lot of professions where you get to fail so publicly.
Hmm.
A lot of times, like if you don't close a sale, or you have a bad day at work because you screwed something up. There's a bug in your website that you were building. That's just as frustrating, but you just don't have people watching. And for some people, the people watching makes it way worse. But I
Hmm.
imagine that they would take defeats the same way privately. Those bad beats happen off stage too when no one's watching. It doesn't feel any better. There's just that little sense of when everyone's watching, can you happy are you to put it on the line in front of them and for them? And
Hmm.
I I think it is a blessing to be able watching. That's cool, and that might not be for everybody's personality, but I think it's cool, and they're giving their time to come watch what you can do, and they should be entertained a little bit. But you can't let, just because people are seeing it, you can't let that crush you. They're not going to look at you as a bad person after that.
Yeah, I think people don't care as much as you do. Like, they're not like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Billy got a third in that tournament. How embarrassing. Like they don't know. Like, they don't care as much as you think they do. It's
Yeah. Do you have anybody who you think was supremely influential to your development as you went up? Were there any coach really certain way, or any relationships that you say this allowed me to get to the next level, or definitely caused me to?
Yeah, I think the first one I think of is just my own personal life would be my dad, just because he paved the way for me to play volleyball. So he introduced me to the sport. He was my first partner. He started a whole club so I could play. We played together at the beach, and I was, a little kid playing with grown-ups. So he was definitely the most influential. I think one trait that coaches I've gravitated to have had is just encouragement. And I think especially somebody who's hard on themselves anyways, when you have a coach that just believes in you and encourages you and thinks you can do it, I think I'll run through a wall for that person. And so I think just believing in your players. And if you're like a coach giving, especially in beach where you don't make a lot, if I have a coach like, whoever, if it's Corey Glaive, who I'm staying with here, who was my coach for a while, or anybody that's like putting some of their time away from their work and their family to help you, because they think you could do something special. I think that's awesome. And I've had a few of those along the way.
Watching from afar, like you've had too many coaches like full time in your pro
Mhm.
career. As far as I know, people who stuck for an entire season. Do you think that you were okay with that? Was that a financial choice? Do I have to find somebody who's going to show up at every point, and then is this actually worth it in the end to try? What's your thoughts on coaches at the pro level?
Yeah, usually it's a financial choice. We just don't make enough to pay a coach to be with us all the time. I think it's a great
Mm.
investment if you have the resources. Like, coaches are awesome; they help a lot. Gravitated towards finding friends or people that can help, and then you have to learn the game on your own a certain amount. Like right now, I'm working with John Mayer, who I think is, if I could pick anybody, it'd probably be him or Karch to help me.
Mm.
And so, but he's busy and he's full time at LMU, and so we won't see him till midsummer. But so for me, it's a little bit more quality over quantity. I think a lot of people get a guy that's just a good arm, and maybe that's what they need, just to serve somebody to serve a lot of balls. Where I'll take a little bit more, especially later in my career, a little more knowledge over just somebody to give me reps. But yeah, I think if you don't have the ability to get a coach, I think one hack is to just train with teams that have a coach. That way you still get the benefit of a good run practice, but also like you can eavesdrop a little bit, maybe pick up some tips for free.
Yeah. Nice move. I think the right structure is kind of maybe what you're saying. Like maybe a lot more pros should just be to hit balls for 2 hours, 1 or 2 days, and then get that coach knowledge to like work on systems and knowledge and say like, hey, give me that at the beginning of the week so that I can implement it over the week, and then I'll see you again at the next report. Especially when the paychecks aren't paying them. Or I think I was discussing this maybe with Kim Hildreth or Sarah Skirmahorn. I said for the American volleyball, I think the answer might be for AVP's players almost to develop like of 2 or 3 teams and just have a steady practice round, because I think we're so obsessed with changing who we play against or who we practice against every single practice instead of working on ourselves. When you're in college, you practice with the same 14 guys every single practice and you still improve immensely in 4 years. It's not because you're randomly changing. So do you think that more players should just stop swapping practice competition constantly, or do you think that we're actually getting styles every day?
If I was running it, I would care less about the consistency of the players, like having the same group, as much as just having the top competition I could get. And obviously, if you are running like a USA national team and you had the top 4 teams or 5 teams, like that is the top and that's consistent. So that kind of works for both. But I think if you had the top 5 players in the US competing against each other all the time, then that would just make everybody better.
But what if should they be then staying and competing amongst themselves all the time, or should they be constantly having to change? Like, do you think that players right now, the way that the rest of the AVP who's not training as the USA 1, 2, and 3 and 4 teams, do you think that the AVP players are doing it right by constantly seeing new competition and scheduling somebody new for their practices every day? Or do you think that they would be more successful if they found one coach to lead 3 teams every single practice?
Yeah, I mean, like truthfully, I don't know the answer to that. I could see there being a need for some sort of freshness if it was playing the same guys over and over, where you kind of know their traits. But the positives would be like you'd have to, change some of those tendencies, right? Because if I play against you for a couple weeks straight, I'm going to know your game better than most people, and so that's going to force you to make some adjustments. So I think there is some positives there. Yeah, I think anytime we're on, I think as a coach, I just want to avoid autopilot. And so anytime things seem like they're getting very relaxed and you're just on autopilot at a practice, that's kind of the thing to avoid. So if I'm too comfortable playing against the same group over and over and I'm not having to think and problem solve, then I think you're not improving as fast. And so maybe, that's a time to get in a new team where you're seeing different looks, they're defending you different, the guy's left-handed, like whatever the situation where you're having to rethink and not just be kind of cruising.
I think that's a good point. If you're just stomping one team and you stomp them for the same reason every time because you know the secret to them, it's like, all right, especially if they're not going to change and adapt. If they keep going back to that tendency that you keep beating them on, it's like, now we're not improving. We've reached our limit here, other than reps and what my coach can tell me. So competitively, not in that state of creation anymore.
Yeah, I think you want to replicate a tournament as much as possible, right? Because that's what we're competing in. And in a tournament, you play a variety of teams, and so I think there's important to, I think at the end of the day, that's what you want to do is like practice to compete, not just like practice to practice. And how can this resemble my competition as much as possible? And so I would, I think there's a lot of things we probably aren't doing right as far as like the amount of time we put into it, because a tournament looks a lot different than most 9 in the morning 2-hour practices.
Yeah, that's probably a good point. Maybe there should be. Wow, that is an interesting point. If people had the time and the bandwidth to be able to go out to the beach 2 or 3 times, get home, leave, that would be more similar.
We train for like a match now, in the morning under pretty pristine conditions. And, if you're playing in a final, you're playing at 3 in the afternoon and it's windy and you're a little tired.
That's a good point. But there's, then you could also say that about marathon runners. Like, are marathon runners training themselves differently? Of course, it's a different sport, but they don't run their 26 until the day of the marathon, and interesting to try to transfer that from ball sport to what's the physical side of it versus what is the actual application of skill and mindset and the environment that you need to win in. That could be very interesting to look at, but it's also tough taking somebody off the beach and now you have to take like 9 hours of their day in order to have a practice. That also doesn't work for a life.
Yeah, you gotta train in reality and maybe not for your body, depending on who you are. And the way things are going now, it's becoming more of a sprint than a marathon because there's small draws and you're playing maybe 2-3 matches a day at most. So I think at the end of the day, your practice has to resemble your competition.
Do you have any things that you're currently focusing on for your game? Like, is it one skill, dialing anything in, or adding anything to your game that, like, this season or this preseason, I've got to add this, or I've got to shore up this?
I think the answer for me is always serving tougher. It's something I'm always working on developing. Right, this year I'm playing with Jeremy Caspear, who's got a really good serve, and so my role might be a little bit more of the strategy guy, where he serves free and tough, and I kind of like place it a little more. But I think serving tough is not just hitting hard. It could be serving to space. It could be serving flat, serving with good floaters, just hitting good locations. So there's a lot of different ways to serve tough. I think that's one area I definitely is always in the forefront of my training. I'm also working on, I guess, probably transition attacking right now would probably be my number 2. I'm sure my numbers go down in trans versus side out. So how can I get better at that?
Is it working on a specific series of shots or locations when you're in transition? Is it just making sure you minimize errors? For me, I think it was, and after the season that I worked on my transition, because I saw the stats on it, finally, I was like, oh dear God, like my transition offense was miserable. So I just said, you know what? I'm going to not try to make decisions. I'm not going to try to score points. I'm just going to dial into, I have 3 spots for options when I am in transitions, and neither of them are none of them are big aggressive swings. And that provided an immediate boost to my hitting percentage, which has been historically like my biggest problem. Digs per game, great, but hitting percentage is always where I'm low, and I didn't realize how bad transition was. So when you're thinking about transition offense, what's the mindset that will help you improve those numbers?
My 2 big focuses within that would be digging high to the middle of the court. So that just like puts us in a situation where I'm digging a settable ball, not just a scramble ball. And then for me is just seeing the set and taking an approach to the ball rather than, zigzagging or just charging the net, having to make adjustments. So it's, staying off the net, it's being patient and really straight line on my approach to the set rather than a predetermined spot. Because inside out, you can, at our level, depend on a pretty good set and, off a good pass. And in trans, it's a lot more chaos. And so how can I protect my approach and keep getting to a really good spot with good timing? And so usually that's digging with height and then really seeing the set. Those are 2 things that I focus on.
Do you have any cues, like physical things or a verbal thing that you tell yourself in the moment that help you wait longer? Because I think what you're saying is wait longer before you start your approach, especially in transition. Because it's the same thing. I try not to take my timing step. I try not to move during the set in transition, whereas I'm already rolling in motion when I'm in, side out. So are there any cues that you give yourself or that you would give a player when they've dug a high ball to the back part of the court?
Yeah, I've tried multiple things. You can either, wait, be patient, and you can start farther back. There's a lot of different things you can try. Usually in serve receive, I'm already taking my step before the setter's contacting the ball. My first, like say my 4th step, if I do a 4-step approach, my first step off of trans, my cue would be more after I see the set before I make that first step. So as far as timing, that would be a little bit of a change to give myself more time. And that step is almost like a skate where I'm like shifting across the top of the sand, like, or like if you think of like an animal prowling, I'm not like just sprinting in. It's like this really like slow push off, like, I'm prowling in, not like a commitment step.
I
I think
love that.
if
A
the
prowl step in
yeah, like
transition.
you're slowly prowling and then you like attack that gazelle or whatever, the last two steps. But if the situation you're saying where I dig to the end line, I want to like create a really big window for my setter. And so I'll either kick out wide or I'll stay off the net to give them a big window to set into versus charging the net and giving them this really tiny spot to set it in.
That is a keyword that I'm going to take to the camps and clinics and classes, the prowl step, and make sure that you're taking your prowl step after the set contact. I think that's brilliant, and that's actionable, that's usable for people like at home and listening. And instead of that big like kind of jog running step, just sliding, skating across the top of sand. Nice. Good job. Sounds like you've coached before. Now, there are just a couple more questions that we have, and I know we've been an hour. If you got to go, you let me know. But do want to know if there are any tools, pieces of equipment, or things that you absolutely must or need to have at a tournament, on the road, at the gym, things that you always carry or you know that you need to have.
Yeah, other than the obvious, water bottle, hat, and sunglasses, I would say the thing I always bring are bands. Every practice, every competition, every game, I warm up with a series of shoulders where I'll put they're the bands that I can attach to a pole or something, and then there's two different things that have straps that I hold. I'll go through a series of shoulder warm-ups with the bands, and then I have two smaller bands that are like circles that I put around my ankles and my knees. And I do hip warm-up stuff and steps and stuff like that. So those are those bands are the equipment that I bring with me everywhere I go. And I like warming up that way. I can, on a hot tournament, I could be in the shade doing it, or I could be in the player's tent doing it and feel very activated and warm before I, step out and do maybe more jogging stuff.
I like that. And I also like it, that little soft cue for people when you're at a tournament. Just because you're warming up doesn't mean you have to be out in the sun on the court right now. You can be doing your body stuff, saving some body heat, saving some calories and some sweat by just doing it in the shade. Some people don't think about.
Yeah, especially as a tournament goes on and you're playing your fifth match, you don't have to maybe have the energy to warm up quite as much or as long. So you got to get a lot of bang for your buck.
All right. So Billy, now's the time where we get to put a little spotlight on all of your extra endeavors. When you talk to you, when you hang out, when you see you play, I don't think people appreciate how freaking funny you are. First of all, anytime, just like your Instagram profile that I read today, it said the world's best source for Billy Allen news, or the world's biggest source for Billy Allen news. It was like little lines like that. They crack me up. But you're in extreme creative, I would say, in terms of directing, idea flow. I don't think the volleyball world has utilized you as much as it should. But you're now the author of 5 books. You've authored 5 different books. The Inner Night, most recently, which is about high performance, is it set in the form of a novel?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one to describe. It's a book for coaches and athletes, but it's basically a sports parable. So it's a fiction story of a night training for a tournament, but it's packed with lessons on effective practice, on mindfulness, on all these things that I think are important. And it's woven into a story that's fun to read. It's short. The idea is like a good summer read for your team or yourself. Yeah, so that's what it is. The Inner Night, train and compete like a champion.
Love it. You also already have another book, Coach Your Brains Out, which is all of your lessons from your podcast, the Coach Your Brains Out podcast, which you co-host with Fuller, Mayer, and Niels. Is everybody still hosting and a part of it? I know you said that John Mayer was the one who's like really keeping it going.
Yeah, they're all still on the ad at the beginning, but it's mostly me and John now. The book is John and I wrote together, and we'll get Andrew Fuller and Niels Nielsen on as guest stars here and there when we're in a pinch.
Nice. And kind of what I liked listening to way back when, I haven't listened in a while, I'll be honest, but I was addicted to it. I mean, I would consume your episodes because of the good conversations. And I think you guys were 100% an inspiration for me starting this. Like, okay, let's keep pulling information out so that players who are coming up, they have a source of great volleyball information. Coaches, especially from your podcast, have great tools to help their players. Was starting that, were you trying to create something for the volleyball world, or was it just you guys hanging out as buddies?
It was definitely the latter. It was a selfish thing. Like we enjoyed podcasts and we talked volleyball on our own. I think we had just been to a conference called Train the Gap where like Karch and Tom Black and some other high performing coach talked, and Trevor Reagan, who at the time was Train Ugly and now he does the Learner Lab. We were pretty fired up on just this idea of sharing ideas, and we were like, hey, let's do a podcast. And what do we know about? What do we know about volleyball? And it was the three of us, Nils at the time, just sitting over my iPhone in John's garage talking. Over time, it was always focused on like the guests. So a lot of podcasts have really cool personalities. Like if you're Joe Rogan or whoever, like, but it was like we kind of fade in the background, and so it's basically just ask a lot of questions, and that's a lot easier for us because we don't have to do much work. We just let the guest carry the show, and then over time it's just it's definitely a resource, and I can say that not because we do a good job, but just because we've had a lot of good guests on there. But as it started out as something more for us, and if anybody liked it, and more than like, oh, we're going to do something great for the world of volleyball, but which I think is also reflected in how much we market it. we like never tell anybody that we do a podcast, but the people that find it think it's
like
cool.
Staple it on your shorts or something.
Yeah. The people that find it think it's a cool little secret that they found out about.
Have you ever been able to like monetize it effectively, or to the point where you're like, oh, this is a nice little boost? Because I know there are tons of websites and like business coaches, and I'm trying to figure out if this podcast will ever be monetized in itself, aside from being, part lead generation for camps and clinics. But have you ever been able to monetize it effectively, and what type of sponsors would be your dream sponsors for it?
So I found out in my own playing career that it's pointless for me to look for sponsors because it's just not worth the effort for me.
I'm on board.
But I think we've done it for maybe like, let's say 7 years. I'd say for the first 6 years, we had one sponsor for like a month. So we just kind of never went that way. But lately we have been able to make some money from it. We have a Patreon where people donate. We have some really cool coaches out there that listen and like and contribute a couple bucks a month. And that helps us out. And that, it adds up over time. And then we also recently, Gold Medal Squared became kind of our like flagship, that they run our podcast. So they do all the hosting stuff. And they just started kicking in a little bit too. So we do little ads now for them because they're a good organization. I think they have good stuff.
They are a great organization. The way I try to treat our coaches, like when we're going to camps and stuff and flying people, how good Gold Medal Squared treated us as coaches, and how they would go out of their way to make sure everything was right. I could not have asked for a better summer job than working with them, as far as role models for people who own a business, and how generous, giving, and how they go out of their way to make their coaches happy and satisfied and keep them coming back. Big fans of that company. Is John part owner yet, or is he just still their main, is he their main beach guy now?
Yeah, I don't think he has much to do with Gold Medal Squared in general. He's part of the Gold Medal Squared beach end, which hasn't really taken off. I think they were starting right around COVID, so they haven't done a lot with that. He's done a few camps, so a lot of room to grow with that. I know they have some sort of videos that him and Tom Black have done, and yeah, it's coming eventually. I mean, it's no better at beach, but
I'm just waiting for them to ask for a little partnership. That's all.
Yeah.
Just get in their ears. And just lastly, tell us what your two-part series right now. There's another source of your comedy was your one novel that said edition 0.5. Yeah, I saw it on Amazon that you have a book that edition 0.5, and I was just like, it just makes me chuckle. But tell me about the Good Blood series.
Yeah, so I have 2 coaching books, and then I also have a fiction series. I have one more book to kind of close out the series. It's called, the first one was Good Blood, and then there was Dark Blood, and the new one's going to be Royal Blood. And it's nothing to do with volleyball. It's just a fantasy action adventure fiction that I've enjoyed writing. It doesn't sell as many copies because I don't have much of an audience outside of volleyball, but I think they're pretty good and they're fun. So if you're a reader, check them out.
Nice. And all of those links, if you guys are watching anywhere right now on Facebook, on YouTube Live, and if you're listening currently to the podcast version, all those links are in the show notes. They'll take you right to Billy's books and his website and his blog and the old kind of good videos. So if you guys want to check them out, just go ahead and swipe down into the comment description link section and you will find them there. Any parting words, Billy?
No, thanks for your time. I know you're killing it, working really hard, better at beach, and I've appreciated watching your content, and your videos are pretty funny too. It's a good balance of humor and insight. So nice work.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. All right. Well, we'll see you on the sand. Have a great day.
All right. See you, Mark.